Hello, everybody. My name is Mark. I'd be very grateful if somebody could just send a quick message, post a comment to say that you can see me and hear me. Okay, and once I get a confirmation from somebody, we'll get on with the webinar today. So let me know when you're good to go, and I'll have a message, and then we can get started. While I'm waiting for somebody to let me know that we're all good and clear, I'll just tell you, you may well have met me before. Brilliant. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Anna. I've been teaching for 33 years in various capacities, and now I work mainly with the military. For my sins, I occasionally work at a local school, and of course I do plenty of teacher training with the TEFL Academy as well. Okay, lovely to see where you're all from. I'm from the south of England. I've just been on holiday to the north of England, and we got back yesterday to have an unfamiliar sensation, which the dictionaries tell us is called warmth. It's the first time in quite a while. Okay, as you know, this webinar will be 25-30 minutes. Any questions are always good. Could you please, anytime you feel you've got a question coming on, just stick it in the comments box. I probably won't answer it immediately, but then we'll deal with them all at the end. If somebody comes up with something particularly pertinent, then maybe I'll try and deal with it on the spot. But I will do the same as what I'm going to be teaching. I'll try to practice what I teach, which is sticking to the plan today. Okay, so as you know, today's seminar is about lesson plans for different skills classes. Now, in fact, skills and systems, I have to say, i.e. we're also going to be talking about grammar classes as well, which are your L3A and your L5B classes. So, sorry, your L3A and L5B assignments, I should say. So, what is lesson planning? You need to be thinking about the lesson itself. And the more experience you get, and some of you, of course, will already have experience of different kinds of teaching, sometimes English as well. It'll involve you thinking about the lesson content, writing the plan, and creating sourcing materials for the lesson activities. Always a tricky one, this, because do you write the plan and then add the materials to it? Do you think about the materials and add the plan? You know, the longer you go on doing this, the more you'll see that the two very much work together. But the plan, of course, is how you present the material. The material isn't just the external things that you've got off the internet or that you've written. It's the whole presentation that we'll talk about here. Okay, we move on. We'll just have a quick look at the structure. And as you can see, we talk about WBP. It's not a particularly common acronym. The warmer introduces the topic of the lesson. And I'll just put something that, again, may be clear to a lot of you, but I mark a lot of assignments, and it's not clear to everybody. The topic of the lesson is not the same as the target language. So if you are teaching the past continuous in L3A or the first conditional in L5B, you don't walk into the lesson and say, "Hi, today we're going to teach the past continuous, first conditional, whatever." The context must reflect the target language. In other words, this is the function it will fulfill by using the target language. Just to give you examples of this, what I mean for that is that, say, if you're teaching the past continuous, you start talking about something that happened to you without using the target language, but you're recounting something in the past, and eventually, of course, you're going to introduce two actions, and that will be moving into the body, where you'll start to actually present the target language that was required to reflect that. With the first conditional in your level 5, it'll be a similar kind of thing. What are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about the future. You're going to talk about plans, because that's what the first conditional is going to reflect. So You always think when you talk about the warmer, you're introducing the topic. The topic must reflect the target language. Just get that one off my chest because it happens a lot, and I thought it's worth just expanding on a little bit. Then the body, which is, as it says, the main teaching and learning part, and here we can have different lesson structures, and this is where you'll have the structure, which you will hang all the different elements of the lesson. I'll put in another caveat now. I'm full of caveats, sorry. I've been writing lesson plans for 33 years. I don't think I've ever stuck to a lesson plan faithfully, including when I've been externally assessed for various qualifications. Okay, Nicola, I'll come back to that at the end and bring that up. Okay, so you've got, as I said, the main teaching and learning part. You've got, and the plan will really reflect that part. That's the vital part of what you're doing when you get the elicitation of the language that you need in order for them to fulfill the rest of it. The plenary is used to review what's been learning, perhaps through a whole class discussion, a question and answer, something like that. So in short, WBA, and it can describe the structure of any lesson. And the two that you will have seen if you've been working with your TEFL Academy course content is, of course, PPP. So present, practice, produce, and TTT, test, teach, test. I will say, and I think the overwhelming majority of people go for PPP. It's a much simpler way of approaching when you're trying to introduce new language to presumably a class that has not encountered this in the past. Okay, so if we have a look at those, two, the most common, as I said, is PPP, and the stage one, present, gives your students the information that they need to manipulate, to play with the language. And it can be used for grammar, reading, listening, and even pronunciation. Although I have to say, a full pronunciation lesson is not what I would ever suggest to anybody. Second part, the practice. And the practice is, of course, first of all, the controlled practice, because that is supporting the language learning. And the focus here is on accuracy, of course. And the third part, well, again, we're going to go through all of these parts a little bit more. And in stage three, the produce element, what we also call the freer practice. And here you are coming through to have a more communicative element to it. They've learnt it, they've got the structure, they understand the form, if you like. Now let's see if they can use it, maybe not perfectly, but use it communicatively at least. Yeah, Nicola, just to go back, WBP is the three parts of the lesson: the warmer, the body, the presentation part, and the P is the plenary. So 1, 2, very much a 1, 2, 3 to that. Okay. The TTT, the test, teach, test, normally used for something more complex, maybe to contrast a new concept with one that your students already know. And it's also, I think, is often a better one to use with what we call emergent language. So emergent language is a stage in the lesson rather than the whole lesson, where a student comes up with something and that you can hear that they don't know the actual language that they need. So they're strategizing, they're doing something really good, which is they're finding a way of saying something, but they're not doing the direct A to B. And you can test and say, okay, does anybody know another way of expressing that? The direct route. It might be a phrasal verb, an idiom, whatever it may be. And then you start to teach. And then, of course, at the end of the lesson, you test it again, and you test it in subsequent lessons, because we never let new vocabulary, new language go. So that's those are the three parts. Again, I do strongly recommend keep it simple when you're doing your assignments. Just go for PPP. Whenever test, teach, test is absolutely great, but I think it's more spontaneous. One of the reasons being that it's about finding the gaps as well, and sometimes those gaps occur in lessons, and then you can think, yeah, okay, this is what I need to go through. And of course, the TTT lesson, there are 5 stages, because you've got the warmer, then the test, then the teach, then the test, and then the plenary. So it still follows that WBP structure. Okay. When you go into a lesson plan, what do you need to know? What do you need to give out on this one? Okay. Just have a quick look at that one. The topic of the lesson, adverbs of frequency. Now, the topic of the lesson, here they have made interchangeable with the target language. The topic of the lesson, if it's adverbs of frequency, would be, say, routines, what you do every single day. I sometimes get up early. I often have a shower before my breakfast, whatever it may be. Adverbs of frequency, by the way, often, sometimes, occasionally, never, always, etc. So if you're looking at that, then you'd also have to look at your aims as well, which are obviously quite important for this, which we'll have a quick look at now. Okay. And your aim, this is what you are looking to fulfill in the body, that central main part, the presentation of the language. When you're doing your aims, which in particular come up in, I think, L3A, but they're always worth bearing in mind for anything, any part of any assignment that you're doing. Think not so much about what the student will do in the lesson. That's not an aim. So it's about abilities, and again, as it says, information skills here. So if I say, an aim is not they can fill in this gap fill, that is not an aim. The aim, therefore, about filling in this gap fill is to say they can understand the structure, and they can use, say, if it's the past simple and the past continuous together, or they can use the future, the simple future and the simple present together in a first conditional two clause sentence. So something like that is what you're looking at. It's actually the understanding that they've got in there and what they are able to do. Okay, these are important differences. So if we go back to the adverbs of frequency, they will be able to use frequency adverbs to describe routines, and this combines the aim with the grammar and the topic. The topic being the routines, the grammar being the, or in this case, the lexis, the frequency, the frequency adverbs. Okay, let's shoot on forward. Okay, and the objectives, the smaller bits. So think about this. You have three aims that you have in a lesson. You may have one overarching aim, which is the understanding of the target language, but within that, with the understanding of it, you've also got to be able to the ability to use it, productively or communicatively. The objectives are, as you can see, the bits that we put down as being parts of the SMART targets. Of course, in this case, the two we're using are realistic and measurable. Realistic, based on their current abilities, and not trying to get them to run before they can walk. And is it measurable? And a lovely example here, students can use 4 common frequency adverbs to describe their morning routine. They don't need to use every single one of them, but if you've come up with 4, then you're really on the way, and that can be seen as proper progress. Okay, so these are obvious things, but it's strange how often that they don't actually work. Having been qualified for so long, and I was for a long time I was a director of study, so I was which is kind of like a head teacher in a language school, and I was getting sent left, right, and centre at the time, because this is about 2010, and a bit both sides of that, because we were looking for this wonderful newfangled interactive whiteboard that was coming out everywhere, and it was just astonishing the number of people who were trying to sell you this stuff, and they would do full presentations and the technology wouldn't work, and they would have no backup whatsoever. And so you would sit in a technology based seminar, presentation, whatever it may be, with a bunch of people fiddling with plugs for the entire 30 minutes that they had been allocated. You really need to have these backups, and it becomes easier as you get more experienced, of course, but not just the plan, but just eventually sometimes just to say, okay, let's rip everything out. It's going to be me and it's going to be you, and we're going to do this, because students do not want to see teachers fiddling with technology. So when it says if technology fails, for instance, at the bottom here, which is the last part of this slide, if technology fails, do you have paper-based worksheets and visuals, etc.? Well, paper-based worksheets might be difficult, because that means that every time that you do a lesson, you have to print out everything. That's the whole point of technology. But if, on the other hand, you were doing a gap fill, if you've got a single copy of the gap fill, you might say, okay, let's not worry about this. I'm going to read these out and you're going to fill them in. And I'll give you an example here. If she hard, she the race. And the two verbs are going to be train and win. And then it's up to you, working in pairs, to decide, okay, which tense goes with which verb. So there's different ways of doing these things where you're thinking, okay, it's not just about the technology, it's not just about technology backups, it's about me and you. I've got enough information that I can actually teach the lesson, whatever. Okay. We're just now going to go through the different stages for different types of lessons, and of course these will all be coming up in particular in the level 5, of course, where this really comes up twice in both assignments A and C. So for a reading lesson, what we're looking at here, you're eliciting the possible topic of the text, and you can use visuals or a role play. So I'll just give you a couple of examples for this. If the text that you were giving was an article, even a story would be great. And you could come up, say, with 4 different images and get them to tell the story. So you've already got something going here. You've already got them in that storytelling mode. If it's a more technical one, or if it's based on a specific topic, maybe a sport or something like that, then ask them what they know about the sport. That's great. And what we call this is activating schemata. It's bringing to the forefront everything that they already know about that topic, and it's interesting them in the topic. So by the time that they move forward to the actual reading, they're interested in it. They want to engage with it. They've said something about their feelings about this in the first place. Pre-teaching vocabulary. This is always a difficult one to plan accurately, but again, it does depend. And if you've got course books, this isn't so difficult. Course books will give you the vocab to pre-teach, and they'll give you the article for them to read. If you choose your own, you have to choose very carefully, and often you have to amend it, get rid of some of the more difficult stuff if it's not going to work for them. Think also about the frequency. Are these terms that they're going to be using in the future, or can you actually get rid of them because they're too specific to the text? Are they vital for their understanding of the text? After all, if there's a particular expression or word in there that is the key that unlocks the text, then it absolutely needs to be in there. In terms of grading the language, using, as it says here, a vocabulary profiler, think very much, it's a term that you'll hear all the time, L+1, language that they might just about be able to understand, but they can't reproduce. So they're actually sort of just moving above what they're capable of in the first place. And of course, from that point as well, you're using that language, then they can use the context to actually say, okay, right, he's taught this, or I've learned this, now we can work with it. Okay, so pre-teaching, just to continue the lessons. And then you've got the first and the second reading task. The first one, skimming or scanning. Very quickly, skimming is the idea of getting a general understanding of the text. And so you ask a general question concerning the text. Scanning is maybe asking simple questions, but they require specific information. So it could just be, how many times did something happen, how many whatevers were mentioned here, and so they're picking out, getting that specific number, and by getting the specific number or action or whatever it may be, the simple answer, they're actually understanding a greater context. Comprehension for deeper understanding. Deeper understanding here can be a difficult term to get your head around, because you've sort of got these two things going on. You've got the idea that you want them to read kind of between the lines, but at the same time, you don't want it to be a completely subjective answer. It's still got to be an answer that's based on the understanding of the text. So a question that would be a deeper understanding would be, say, how do you think that this person is feeling at this time, when of course it hasn't actually been it hasn't been delineated in the text. So you're getting them to extrapolate what's happened to this person and what their feelings will be about it. On the other hand, if you say, how would you feel if this happened to you, you're getting a little bit more subjective, because there may be a greater variety of responses depending. It could still work. Has this ever happened to you? That's completely subjective. That has nothing to do with the text, and so that's the one that I would avoid. So it's a difficult sort of tightrope walking here that you have to do, to try to read between the lines. And obviously, the extent to which they're able to do that depends on their own level. And finally, of course, the follow-on communicative task. And as it says here, a small group discussion based on the themes of the reading text. That's there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, a small group discussion, not a whole group. There's a very simple reason for that, and this is part of classroom management, which very much is part of your lesson plan as well. The interactions we'll look at later. You don't go for a whole class discussion, because you'll find you've got three bright sparks who are loud, confident, or stronger than the others, who will dominate the conversation, and the quiet ones will get a chance to hide. Let it be smaller groups. Let them develop the confidence. I'm talking here obviously about the weaker or the more hesitant students. Let them develop the confidence to say something a couple of times, to rehearse what they're going to say. Then when you come to a larger group discussion, they've got the confidence. They can come on. They can actually talk. They can say the things that they've already tried to say and that they've already had feedback on from their peers in the small group. That feedback doesn't necessarily have to be correction. That feedback can just be people, oh yeah, okay, oh, now that's interesting. They've got that confirmation that what they're saying is okay. Okay, let's move on to the next one here, a listening lesson. Now, a listening lesson, of course, is very similar to a reading lesson. The reason for that being, it's receptive. So therefore, you've got the text coming in, and they're having to deal with it. And so you're doing very much the same things, as it says for the warmer. Elicit the positive topic, the possible topic, visuals, role play, etc. How would you feel if something happened to you? Without telling too much of the story, of course, and you're pre-teaching the vocabulary in the same way. And as always, get them speaking, get them involved, get them interested in this. So as you can see, it's very, very much the same idea and the same principles that I've just underlined for the reading text. The same again, just an extensive listening. You're listening to the whole thing. You can, however, also ask what we would regard as being scanning questions in a reading. In other words, listening for specific information as well. That's absolutely fine. And then you're following the same protocols as you would for a reading, detailed and deeper understanding. You might find, because it's a listening and not a reading, they get fewer opportunities. They can't go back and listen to it again, that the actual questions that you have may need to be simpler. But that's something that will come with judgment, will come with experience, will come with knowing your class as well. And the follow-on communicative, as before, small group discussion, give people the confidence to express themselves before they come out with anything else. I'll say one other thing about the discussion, the communicative task, and this is general. It's not just for listening and reading, but for any task that you have to do. If you have a particular topic, don't ask them to discuss the topic. Just the same as you are aware, when you give them a reading or a listening, the questions are always given before, so they have a reason to do the listening. They have a reason to do the reading. Sorry, to do the reading or the listening. They have got reasons to actually undertake the task of listening, to fulfill for instance, a set of questions. The same goes for the communicative task. They need a reason to do it. So just saying, "Oh, discuss bad weather around the world, discuss climate change," whatever the topic has been, is not enough. They have to have a reason. They have to have an opinion to hold. So there's all sorts that you can do for this, all sorts of reasons why they can be discussing something. They might be a kind of for and against. It may be a question of why somebody was saying something. It might be a question of to what extent they do, or it could be a how. It could be, how is this reflected in your country? If you have a multinational group, tell us about experience of this in your country, as opposed to the one that's mentioned in the article. Personal experience. It can be any number of things, but give them a reason to speak. If you just say discuss a topic, at best you'll get one or two people speaking up. Okay, let's go on. And I think you'll see a pattern emerge with this as well. As you can see here with the grammar lesson. Remember, this is your PPP that we were talking about. And the same thing. You establish the context. You got your pictures. You ask your questions. You talk about they talk about their personal experiences, or personal opinions, whatever it may be. You elicit the example sentence. Elicitation is something I've talked about a great deal on previous ones. I really hope, I haven't got time to go into it today. But anytime you see elicitation, go back in your course content and read about it. It's such an important part of a grammar lesson, where you're not simply presenting the language, you're getting them to come up with it as far as you can. Okay. Concept check, the understanding of the function. Fairly straightforward. It's not just that they understand what it is, it's why they use it. Also think about this as being something fairly specific. For example, in the level 3 assignment A, you've got the past continuous. It is past continuous for an interrupted action. The past continuous has other uses as well. For example, at 7 o'clock, the sun was shining, the children were in the garden playing, or they were playing in the garden, to be more strict about it, and I was feeling really happy. That's not the target language. It's the target language. It's not the target function. The target function was, I was walking to school and I fell over, or I was walking to school when a car hit me. That's an interrupted action. So concept check for the understanding of the function is very, very important, because it has to be precise in that way. The practice stage, as we've mentioned before, it's accuracy based, your multiple matching exercise, your gap fill, whatever it may be. And of course, your freer based again with fluency. The fluency here, of course, is always a lovely balancing act, because the best one that you ever have with a fluency one is when you find that you could actually step out of the classroom and leave them to it, and they're going to be boom, and they're going to be going for it, and they're going to be using the target language. More common is you're doing a bit of plate spinning. You're going around from group to group, and you're helping out, you're correcting a little bit, you're monitoring, of course, you're doing all the things that a teacher should do. But there is an ideal out there, which is that they love it so much they can go on without you. And it's wonderful when you achieve that, as you occasionally do. And the plenary, the most obvious plenary is something like, okay, I'm a new student, I got here late, tell me what we've been learning today. There's ways around that. It's also a form of concept checking, the same as you do in the presentation stage. Whereas you can get them to concept check you if you like, and it can be a little bit repetitive in that way. But one of the things it does do is it allows you to check out the entire class and listen. it's not just about getting the answers back from 2 or 3 people. It's about making sure that everybody's coming back and everybody has understand this. Try, as we often say, the pace of the slowest. It's not just about the strongest student getting it, it's about everybody else. Okay. Other lesson plan elements, the interaction. This is oh boy, interaction could have its own lesson. You can see what it means here. Just so we're clear: teacher to class, teacher to student, student to students, and student to student, which would be just 2 people. So TC is when you're giving the presentation and you're simply talking to, giving them information. A much more common one is TCT, if you like, because you're saying something to the students, but they're getting something back. Teacher to student or teacher to students would be maybe if you're going around and you're monitoring. And student to student can either be a group or SS 2 students, so they're working in pairs. These are all really important, and with more experience, but this can start as soon as you can. Really try to put your head forward into what the class actually looks like. It's a big thing that happens. That teachers can often put a huge amount of effort into creating a really beautiful piece of material to work on, but then they forget about how to present the material. They've remembered how to, they've really thought about how to actually present the target language, but then they've got an exercise. Oh, hang on, how are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? This is a control practice. Okay, what are the set of simple instructions that I need to give to somebody to say, I want you to do this? If it's a gap fill, it can be very simple because they can look at that. They've seen it. They've seen something like that before. They've seen sentences. They've seen the gaps. They know that they've got to put the verbs in brackets in there. You don't need to say very much, but you still need to say, okay, you're going to do this on your own. Are you going to do it in pairs? Or are you going to do it in groups? So think about that and think about the benefits that you get from one or the other. The biggest benefit, of course, being that the stronger students will help the weaker students, and hopefully they can talk them through it as well. So it kind of becomes a part of a plenary, and the stronger students are saying, well, it's this. The reason it's this is because this goes first and then this comes after, whatever it may be. So really think about interaction. If there was one thing I would say from assignments that gets ignored more than any, I would say it's almost certainly the interaction. We think we still have these instincts of sort of a lesson is a bit like today, forcibly, of the teacher standing at the front and delivering to the students who are sponges, and that's not the way that we want it to work. And the last thing is very important: inclusion. So all students need to be included. So regardless of their ability, as we said, they need, we look at the pace of the slowest and we look at ways. Interaction is one of them, of making sure that the ones who are struggling more nevertheless get the chance to keep up and get the same learning as the stronger students. And sometimes when you do this, your weaker students become your stronger students. If they actually get the chance, you'd be surprised how often that happens. Additional learning needs. Additional learning needs are, of course, a vast topic. You only have to think about your responsibilities towards people as well, and what you can do to help them. Offhand, I would say the most important thing that you can do, it can just be that 5 seconds, 10 seconds where you sit down, say when they're working in small groups or in pairs, something like that. You sit down, you listen to what somebody has said, and you look them in the eye and you just go, good. Or you say, good, but let's have a look at that. That little bit of connection just with any individual makes such a difference. And they might feel that for once they're not actually the difficult one that's a bit of a pest and the teacher wishes they would go away, which they know. They're actually somebody who is valued and somebody who's important to you. If you can do that, then you have the greatest chance of doing the next bullet point of allowing the students to reach their goals and their potential. And it gives the value. It gives the inclusion. that, I think, that little bit of 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, 1-to-3, whatever it may be within that, is the one thing I could not stress enough in any lesson, in any environment. Okay, differentiation, which again is a similar thing, but it's something that needs really building into your lesson plan. What I mentioned at the start about the idea of the topic, something that they're talking about, and then the target language, the language they use to talk about the topic, is very much part of the lesson. It's the most important part, but what you use to go to, what you add to that, you think about the different parts of it that you've got there. You've got maybe the speaking at the start, you've got the visuals, you'll show pictures, you've then got the presentation part, which is, if you like, the logical part. You put the timeline up or whatever else it may be. You've then got the grammar, the structured part, or whatever it is, or it might be the pre-teaching of the vocabulary. You've then got the group work, and so all of these things have slightly different ideas. You don't have a grammar lesson. You have a grammar-based lesson, but a grammar-based lesson still involves talking, because you need to communicate the grammar that you've learned. You need visuals to illustrate that. And so here we come up with VARC, which is the differentiation of students' learning styles. This, I have to say, went a bit mad a few years back, where they were talking about 9 or 10 different learning styles, all of which needed to be included in a single lesson. Which obviously hadn't thought about the fact that teachers need to eat, sleep, and drink in between lessons, because it was going to take so much preparation. But I'll take you through them anyway, because these are important. V is the visual, so like I say, the images, if you like. Auditory, the obviously listening. They get to, and again, a listening doesn't mean necessarily they have to do a listening exercise. They're listening to the teacher. They're listening to each other's. Reading and writing, getting something down on paper, always important, and seeing something, seeing the language represented in some form or other. And K is kinesthetic, so movement as well, getting them, especially with younger students, of course, getting them out of their seats, moving them around, getting them, and all of these things bring the class together. Group students by shared interest and ability. That, of course, I would say is a contentious one. First of all, how much do you know about your students to know if they can share their interests? And secondly, the ability, if you're talking about a controlled practice, do you want all of your strongest students together and all of your weakest students together? It can work. It can work sometimes. And the way it would work is that if you have backup, so the strongest students finish early and you go, okay, right, I've got this for you to do. And then you can give them additional work while you're spending more time with the weaker ones. The other way of doing that as well, as I've mentioned, is you're grouping them so that maybe stronger ones are helping weaker ones, and they're getting a chance to articulate the target language while helping others, which again also forms a classroom bond as well, and makes them feel like a group, like a team, which is really important. Managing the classroom, of course, this kind of goes without saying, I would hope, although I do hear students coming from very surprising educational backgrounds sometimes, but we think about this as being a safe and supportive environment. It just, again, really should go without saying. We don't pull some of the stunts that you probably encountered from your teachers, and I certainly encountered from mine, which was, when I was at school 40 plus years ago. No, we don't judge. We just do our best. And if you do have difficulties, and this is again shading into classroom management, if you do have difficulties, that's another question. But remember, you've got backup as well. You're not the person who has to deal with these things necessarily. You have to teach a good lesson. If somebody's giving you too much trouble, you have somebody to speak to, and you let the process of the school take care of things, rather than taking it all on your own back. Feedback isn't only focused on error correction, which is so many ways of expressing this, but yes, you have to think. You need to create an environment. And again, this wasn't the case when I started teaching. You create an environment where mistakes are encouraged, because mistakes mean effort is being made. Effort's being made. You praise the effort. You work on the correction, and as much as possible, you help everybody understand that when somebody makes a mistake, you might highlight that mistake, but you're highlighting it for the benefit of everybody else. And as a head teacher, or a former head teacher, I can say that one of the biggest criticisms that students used to have of classes, one of the things they wanted more of, was error correction. They'd say, I'm saying stuff, I've spoken for 30 seconds, and the teacher's nodding enthusiastically and going, yeah, that's great. I know I'm making mistakes. I want to know what the mistakes are. It is possible to do error correction to an individual in a class, in front of the class, if you have created the dynamic that allows that to happen, where you're saying, well done, that's really good. I can see what you've expressed there. Now let's look at a couple of things that you've done, because the error correction that's appropriate for that individual tend to be appropriate for the rest of the class. Everybody's learning something from that correction. Okay, so thus is differentiation. And a little bit more as well. I think that's pretty much the end of what we've got to now. Thank you. There's some really good questions here that I'm going to deal with. What I'm also going to do, however, if I can, I'm on an unfamiliar computer. I'm also now just going to stick up the survey as well, which I would be very grateful if you would. That should have come up. Oh yeah, and now I've just put it on there. Now I'm going to show it. Yeah, okay. I will bring this up at the end as well, but I'd like you to take a quick look at that if you could, and if you can, just cut and paste or whatever you need to do with it. I'll also bring that up at the end, and there's a little QR code that you can also go if you've got your phones handy. While we're looking at that, I'm just going to ask you to throw in any more questions that you have, and I've got a couple of questions already, so I'm going to have a deal with these. Okay, so the first one I didn't understand about the warmer and the topic. Just to be clear about that, sorry, I probably said too much about it, but to be clear about that, the warmer is when you introduce the topic. The topic is not the target language. So that means that the topic that we'd use if you're going to be talking about the first conditional is, tell me about your plans for the weekend. If your target language is the past continuous, then you're going to be saying, you might be telling a story without using the target language. I was walking to school. No, sorry, you wouldn't say that. I walked to school this morning. Something happened. What do you think happened? And then you've got the students coming back with, you fell over, a car hit you, a bird pooed on your head, whatever they want to come up with. And then you can choose something and go, okay, right, now we've got the two actions, and then you start the presentation. So you've moved from the warmer to the presentation. So the topic is the idea of the subject that you're talking about, which will require the target language. Okay, right, next one here. I am still waiting for further questions, by the way, so I'll be very, very grateful if you would put some up. We normally get a good round dozen. Thank you for this. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I'm not going to humiliate myself by trying, but thank you for that. Should we incorporate reading assignments in every lesson we plan? You asked this a little bit earlier on, so I'm hoping I've partly responded to this one. As we've said, every lesson requires different elements, but a different element might mean something. In this case, the R of the VARC, which is the reading or writing, doesn't actually have to be a full article. Reading can be anything. Reading can be, you're reading the instructions to something that you have to do to a particular lesson, to a particular exercise I've given, that somebody's given you on grammar, for instance. That would be reading as well. It could be any number. It could be any number of things. So it doesn't have to be a reading assignment. And the same goes for listening, because listening doesn't have to be a listening assignment, listening exercise. It can be listening to the teacher. It can be listening to your partner expressing themselves, and you as a student have to respond to what your partner has to say. So it can mean any number of things. The same kinesthetic. Yeah, let's have some movement. Let's have some mingling if we can do that. Let's have a bit of standing up and sitting down, particularly with younger classes, of course. But it doesn't mean you have to have a full-on tennis match every time you teach a lesson. So all of those come into it, and visual, just to cover that one as well. Get some images up there. Get people thinking about different ideas before they actually have to come up with a target language. I'm still coming up with this now. Okay. Any other questions? If not, I will move forward to the end, but I'll give you another 30 seconds now. While I'm also doing that, I'm just going to pop forward, to the Q&A, which I should have already done. My apologies. So anything else for that? While I'm waiting for that, I will thank you for attending. I will also just pop up this, which is what you thought of the webinar. So if you've got your phone handy, if you can just take the QR, that will do it absolutely fine. I'm just going to give you another 30 seconds for any questions that you want to come in, or anything else that you would like to say. That would be great. Yes, Tracy, you should be able to rewatch these. They will go up on YouTube, and you will receive a link, or I'm not sure how it works, whether you receive a link or whether it's simply put up somewhere on the links will just be put up on the TEFL Academy website. I'm not too sure. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the hellos. It was lovely to see where you're all from as well, by the way. A lot of people from South Africa, but we also got some people from London. You're about 100 miles away. Hello, New York and Alabama. So it's great. Always nice to know where people are from. Oh, from Sheffield. I was in Sheffield for longer than I wanted to be yesterday on the motorway, stuck in traffic, Michelle. So thank you for that. I don't think it's actually your specific problem. Thank you all, and I will just bring this forward and hopefully see you again very soon. Okay.